Dr. Jazz.
I listened to the last record, Meeting of Minds.
Okay.
And I wanted to ask you, how did you come up with the idea to do that? Like, I know you've done like so much big band work and arranging, but to do, with the voices also, where did the idea come from, and how did you approach it?
Yeah, the Manchester Craftsmen's Guild, the label that I had been recording big band music for, actually Marty Ashby, who's the head of that label, had the idea, and he has a connection with the New York Voices. Actually, his brother Jay, a trombonist, is married to one of the singers in the New York Voices.
Okay.
So, I've done that. I guess that was my sixth CD for MCG, and we're always kind of brainstorming to see what an interesting next project might be. So Marty came up with the idea of doing something with the New York Voices.
Yeah.
And I just so happen to have a bunch of arrangements of songs from the 40s that I'd done over.
I love that. Yeah.
So it all kind of fit together nicely, and it was a really fun project.
Yeah, it's so cool, because you did songs like, Autumn Leaves, Speak Low, and all this stuff, which has been done so many times, but you did it in such a nice way that it's like, you listen to the arrangement, it's like, wow, okay. Yeah, that's a nice way to approach it,
Yeah, well, the material is so great, those songs are, they're just, to me, they're blank slates. I mean, they're so well crafted. You could go just about anywhere with them. I mean, the trick is to sort of maintain the integrity of the tune.
Yeah.
By not going too far, but they're wonderful tunes to derange, as I like to say.
Derange, yeah, that's a good one. I mean, because it's tricky, right? Let's say Autumn Leaves, how do you approach an arrangement of Autumn Leaves, which has been done, I don't know, 6,000 times on albums?
Yeah.
Or I don't know,
I don't know. I mean, I just, started, picking little snippets of ideas out of my brain, and, came up with this sort of 12/8, Afro rhythmical thing. And then, of course, always a little bit of reharmonization and, a few little hooks or, melodic hooks or rhythmical patterns or whatever, just the usual stuff we do.
Yeah, of course. It sounds natural, but still, it's like, it's quite tricky to do it with songs like that. For me, it's like always like, oh, what do I do with it?
Well, look, if you listen to all different kinds of music, and I certainly do that.
Yeah.
And I also have the luxury of getting to play in a lot of different musical idioms. So there's never a shortage of combinations, of unusual combinations of, rhythms, harmony, melody, style. So there's always something new to do. It's sort of a recombining of elements.
Yeah, I love that with you guys. I mean, with you especially, but also listen to the one that you did with the WDR Big Band and Yellowjackets.
Yeah,
it's so cool. I couldn't imagine. I never saw that coming, to be honest.
Well, that was a logical thing to do.
Yeah, next step. Yeah, but I didn't expect it.
No,
that was so cool.
Boy, I expected it. I was waiting. I mean, when I became the chief conductor there in 2016, I thought, man, as soon as we can, we're going to get the Yellowjackets over here, because we had worked with that band before in mid-1990s.
Oh, okay.
And it's a great band, and the Yellowjackets are a great band, and I knew that the combining of the two would really, really be fantastic.
How did you become involved, with that big band, with the WDR?
Well, I started working with them back in the late '80s. The producer Wolfgang Hirschman and I met. Actually, I was on a gig in Austria a New
Austria,
Year's
wow.
Eve gig with Liza Minnelli.
Seriously? Wow.
Yes, and Wolfgang was there with the WDR filming for television, and we met. And he approached me and said, I manage a big band in Cologne. Would you like to come and work with us? I said, yeah, sure. So that it started there, and I did 2 or 3 productions with them. Then the Yellowjackets did some things with them, and then there was a lull in there. And then at a certain point in time, I started going back and doing a few projects.
Yeah.
And then they asked me if I wanted to be the chief conductor.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Yeah, so it's normal since you've done so much work as with big bands. It's kind of like you're such a logical, perfect person for that. How should I put it? But yeah.
I mean, the whole time I was sort of wondering, so why me? And I think, I mean, what I've sort of I've concluded that, I'm somebody, I write in a distinctive way. I have a personal sound and style, and I play, and that's sort of in the mix. And, I'm involved with interesting projects. Yeah. And it just seemed like, I mean, all the conductors before me were in that same category. I mean, Micah Benny is a wonderful composer, great piano player. So,
Yeah. Is this like how you became part of the Yellowjackets in 1991, right? 90. Yeah. I wanted to ask you, like, how did that happen, first of all, and how did this make you feel? Like, they were quite big already, and becoming part of such a already almost an institution back then already. Like, how was that for you back then?
I'm just trying to think of the sequence of events. I met Jimmy Haslip, I think in the early 80s. I was playing with Jaco Pastorius in Los Angeles, and we met and talked briefly. And then the next meeting was in Aruba. I was working with Michael Franks, and Steve Cahn, the guitarist, was in the band. Steve and Jimmy were good friends, so we all wound up hanging out. And so 1990, their saxophone player, Mark Russo, told them he wanted to move on. And so they were looking for someone, and they approached me about doing a recording in Los Angeles, just to sort of see how that went. As a guest, they weren't really asking me to join the band per se. And it was a really nice experience. We made the record called Greenhouse. Yeah. And then subsequent to that, did some touring. We went to Asia for a month, and then started touring a little bit. And after a year of that, it felt very comfortable and inspiring. And they asked if I wanted to be a permanent member, and I said sure. Yeah. It's a great situation to be in a partnership band, because 4 heads are way better than 1. And prior to that, I've either worked for leaders or functioned as a leader of my own ensembles. So this was something new and really exciting and very gratifying, actually. Yeah. Just to be on a team that way. And it's been great. I mean, it's been 31 years.
That's incredible. Yeah.
It never gets old. Never,
How do you guys keep it fresh? Like, I mean, okay, you did records with Mike Stern and Luciano, which kind of changes things. But I did such a talk with Paul McCandless, and they did Oregon for 50 years almost. Yeah. And you guys you had lineup changes, which I guess also changes a little bit.
A few, not a lot.
A few, yeah. But how to keep it fresh, such a.
Well, I think we individually keep it fresh by, study, practice,
doing your own
listening,
things also.
trying to keep moving forward. And we also really cherish the opportunity to come together as the Yellowjackets and play. Yeah. Yeah. It's just, it's 4 very empathetic, great people, so they're not only, you know, colleagues to me, they're my good friends.
Yeah,
and I
that's so
enjoy
important.
spending time with them. And, you know, the music goes anywhere. It goes everywhere. There's no real limitations, you know, in terms of style or anything else. We try to hear music in our heads and feel it in our hearts and bring it into the band and play together. And it's always great.
Yeah, it's beautiful. Yeah, it's a nice thing that you can do this actually. Like, you know, 30 years, it's quite a,
Yes, it is.
that's a long one. It's like, you know, I've done these talks with so many players, and talking 30 years, it's like in 1985, thinking back to times of Elvis, if you think about it. You know, it's basically history already, musical history. So
Yeah. Well, hey, you know, I started working professionally in 1974.
yeah,
I worked with a guy named Ymir Diodato,
yeah,
traveled the world. He had a big record at the time on CTI. And then right from there, played with the Tito Puente Orchestra for a year in New York. And then with the Buddy Rich Band for 2.5 years. And then the Thad Jones Mel Lewis Big Band, and on and on.
But
so I've been very lucky that way.
I wanted to ask you about, you mentioned 70s in New York. Like, how was that for you, like as a young saxophone player? You know, because let's say early 70s, we're talking about, you know, David Liebman, Steve Grossman, I guess Michael Brecker, all these amazing players. And how was the feeling among all of you guys? Like, as
there was camaraderie, and the great thing about that period was you could be a starving artist and live in Manhattan, which is really impossible today.
Yeah,
just due to, you know, what's happened with real estate and the, you know, the price of living and so on. So as a result, nobody was that concerned about making money playing jazz. I mean, you know, most of us made money playing other kinds of music, but we would get together in these lofts. Now, lofts were generally commercial spaces in a commercial neighborhood where you didn't have neighbors, and you know, you could rent for very little money a large space and set up a drum set and a Fender Rhodes piano and a couple of amplifiers and just have guys come over and play literally 24/7.
How did these sessions look like? If you give me an example of one, like, I don't know.
You know, Mike Brecker used to come over all the time and play, or I'd go over to his place and we'd compare notes and play. He'd play drums, I'd play saxophone, I played drums, he'd play saxophone. There was a loft down on Warren Street where John Abercrombie, Jeff Williams, and a now piano player named Mark Copeland, who then was Mark Cohen. He was a saxophone player when I first met him around the early 70s. And so I would go there a lot, and there was always people jamming, people playing. And frequently, you know, if you couldn't get a whole rhythm section together, right down the street, I lived on 21st Street, a drummer named Bob Jospe lived with a trumpet player, John Dirth. I'd go over there and we would just hang out and play, and, you know, drums and saxophone and trumpet.
Yeah.
It was a great learning experience, a great time. Just people were open and relaxed and, you know, but stretching, going for something, you know, trying to play some music.
Because you attended Manhattan School of Music, right, in the early 70s, or?
I did. I started at the Hart College of Music in 1970 in Hartford, Connecticut. Jackie McLean had just arrived there. I was actually a clarinet student, classical clarinet student.
Wow.
And made it. I got through 2.5 years there. And Jackie actually suggested I move down to New York City because, you know, the scene there was quite active. And so I transferred to Manhattan School of Music and got through 4 years by the skin of my teeth. I mean, it was really hard. It got increasingly harder to go to class because, you know, there was all this activity, you know, in the lofts and people playing. And man, I lived with this guitar player, you know, we used to get up and play tunes and, you know, play chess and talk about philosophy. And to me, it was a lot more interesting than what I was studying at Manhattan School of Music. So,
yeah. But how was that first experience for you when you came to New York? Like,
well, I grew up in New York. So,
and then you went to Connecticut.
well, Connecticut was just up the
like
road,
really close. Yeah.
But I grew up in a suburb of New York City.
Okay, it was like that. Yeah.
And when I was 15 already, I was going to the Village Vanguard, the Village Gate, going, you know, heard Monk and Sonny Rollins.
Oh man. Wow.
So, yeah, back then you could get into all these joints. You didn't have to be 21 or anything like that.
Yeah.
You know, you just had to be tall enough where they have the money to get in.
Yeah. That's incredible. I wanted to ask you, you know, all these saxophone players that were, I think about Michael Brecker, you kind of established like this amazing bond. I mean, I have some records with both of you guys on it. And
yeah, he was a great person, you know, wonderful person. And we met on the scene in New York. I forget exactly when and where, but we spent some time together. And, you know, actually, he moved out of the city. That must have been in the 80s. And my wife and I would come to visit him and his wife in Hastings on the Hudson. And it seemed very nice up there. And we had our first and only child, a son. And so we were thinking, it might be good to find an area with a good school system. And so we actually wound up moving up to Hastings on the Hudson. Then I lived 2 minutes away from Mike. I also lived 2 minutes away from John Patitucci and Tim Reese and Gary Simoleon. It was a really nice community of musicians up in Hastings back then.
That's incredible. Yeah.
And you'd go to, it was kind of funny. We'd have it, you know, like parents' night at the elementary school, and I'd see all my colleagues, you know, that had kids in the school. You know.
It's like a mini big band there. It's like, you know.
Yeah.
But I have this record. You know, I have the one that you did like with Mike Formanek and Erskine and Don Grolnick. It's like, you know, where you do giant steps and all, and amazing. That giant steps version is like crazy. But then I listened the other day to amazing record you guys did with Joachim Kuhn, you know, the piano player. And was that no, you probably did more sessions together like before that, or was that the first time you played? Like,
I think we played on an Al Foster record together. Right. There were a couple, but a funny story about the Joachim Kuhn date. Joachim's, you know, he's a virtuoso pianist, as we know, and a really interesting composer. He writes rather difficult, complicated music, and none of us got to see the music in advance. So, you know, we're at the session, and he passes out this tune. It's like way up tempo, like, you know, the changes are flying by, and they're all like slash chords, you know, things you would definitely want to sit down and spend a good week, you know, shedding and trying to just hear and, you know, absorb the sound of. And so here we are sight reading. And on this one tune, I had to play the first solo and Mike played after me. So, you know, I start soloing and I am struggling, man. I'm, you know, like my nose is right up to the music. I'm like, oh, holy shit, this is hard. You know, what do I do? Just hanging on for dear life. I managed to get through the solo, and then Mike plays after me. And so, you know, I'm sort of recovering, and I hear this just absolutely marvelous saxophone playing next to me. And I look over, and his eyes are closed. He's not even looking at the music. And it's like he came out of the womb playing this tune. He's so comfortable and familiar in the changes and just playing the most amazing saxophone, you know. It was stunning. I was stunned. I mean, I was sort of like, you know, and after the take was over, I said, how on earth did you do that? And, you know, he was very self-effacing and humble. He said, man, I was just bullshitting. you were not bullshitting. You were playing
Yeah.
some amazing music, and and it kind of showed me that he was such an evolved musician, even at a very early age, where he could scope on something complex and sort of really ingest and understand and conceptualize almost instantaneously what was going on, and just play beautifully, which that's something amazing.
But he did then. Probably he learned that, but you did as well, right? Through so much session work, you guys did like a studio sessions.
Yeah. Mike had this intuition, as well as being a very hard worker, but he just could pick up on things very, very quickly. I mean, I remember once being at his house, he was trying to explain something about the electronic wind instrument to me, and I hung in there for a brief moment in time, but then he lost me. I mean, I was just sort of like, I didn't know what the hell he was talking about, and he sort of saw that I was floundering, and I don't remember where it went from there, but just a very deep, highly intelligent and evolved person on many levels.
It's incredible. Yeah. No,
although he didn't know how to put gasoline in a car. I mean, the story goes, I mean, if he had to go to a gas station and fill up his car with gasoline, he couldn't do it because he never did it, right? I mean,
sure.
He did. I mean, he played music and he wrote music, and that's what he did. He was also a family man, but in terms of his daily activity, it was music.
Yeah. Yeah, it makes sense. But can I ask you, Bob, something about these sessions, like, because you've done so many of them also, like, and this was all sight reading jobs, right? I mean, how did like these calls look like? You got the charts, play a solo there, or
most were sight reading. I mean, this pre-internet, you were less likely to get music in advance, whereas during this internet time, it's so simple, right? I mean, if I'm going to record with somebody, I send them some sort of demo and copies of the music, right? Because one would assume that you'd want to be prepared and come in, but that wasn't always the case back in the day. But yeah, I mean, I always, I learned the hard way that it's really imperative to be prepared. And one of the most humiliating experiences I had was subbing on a Broadway show for a mentor of mine, a fellow named Al Regney. It was a remake of The Pirates of Penzance, I believe. It was a Gilbert and Sullivan operetta. And, there was 6 woodwind, 6 doubles. It was flute, clarinet, piccolo, bass clarinet, soprano saxophone, tenor saxophone. And I went, typically you'd go and you'd watch the show and, maybe record it with a little handheld recorder, and ideally get a copy of the book and take it home and listen to the recording and really learn it so that you're not guessing, because when the downbeat starts, man, it's fast and furious. Anyway, I didn't know this at the time. And I went in and, Al's a great player and he made it sound so easy. I thought, oh, how hard could this be? Little did I know, and I really didn't do my homework. And I went in there and man, that, with the instrument changes and, the conductor's yelling at me because I'm playing something on piccolo that's supposed to be on flute. And I think I lost 5 pounds that day, but I thought, man, I'll never do this again. So subsequently I, would take the book home and record it and really listen and try to be as prepared as I could be.
Yeah, but you mentioned like all those big bands, like, Buddy Rich, and how did you get involved into that scene? Like, Mel Lewis and Sam Jones actually also, right?
Word of mouth, basically.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
That's the way bands form in general. I was in New York. I did this gig with Ymir Deodato. It was a pretty high profile gig. Then I worked with Tito Puente. I took Sal Nistico's place in Tito Puente's band.
Oh yeah, shit, yeah, of course.
And so, you know, it's a small club, this musician thing, and word travels fast. And Buddy put together a band spring of 1975 in New York City. He hired a contractor who probably just asked around, like, who are the hot young guys that, you know, would be willing to subject themselves to the abuse that Buddy was going to hand out. And my name came up, and off we went, you know.
How are these guys? Like, you know, okay, you mentioned the abuse of Buddy, but like, how were these guys? I mean, Sam Jones, like, you know, how were these guys as band leaders? And
great. I mean, great musicians.
Yeah.
You know, some better band leaders than others. I mean, Buddy was, you know, he was a real dichotomy, you know. I mean, he was really in your corner in a big way. At the same time, you know, he could get very touchy and angry at the drop of a hat and just freak out. But underlying that, I had the sense that this guy cared about playing and cared about the musicians who care. You know, if you came to the gig ready to play, he cared about you and would support you no matter what. Yeah. And, you know, I was a bit of a knucklehead. I was young. I was 21. I said some stupid things that I never should have said. And, you know, he didn't fire me, you know. Yeah. He yelled at me, but, you know, I felt like he was a father figure, if anything, you know. Yeah, sure. I'm forever grateful for some of the things he said to me. I mean, you know, he gave me a cassette tape of a record he did with Lester Young and Nat Cole without a bass player. And, you know, he said, here, listen to this. You know, you need to hear this. And he was right. You know, I hadn't done my homework, as in, you know, listening to some of the older players at that juncture. And I'm forever grateful for that. He also gave me the opportunity to learn how to write for big band. I wanted to ask you that. How did that happen? Like, did he ask you, or just like, you know? Yeah, he asked. Actually he told me to write something. Oh, wow. And I, you know, of course I was scared because I had never done it, and it was Buddy Rich, and I knew, you know, I saw what happened if he didn't like an arrangement that somebody brought in. But I was also excited, you know. It's like, man, this could be really interesting. I mean, we're playing every night. I get to hear what I've written and, you know, make adjustments, and so I jumped on. What was it with Buddy also that you went to Europe the first time, or did you go already? No, we went 77. It would have been April 77. I think, April. And I remember the first stop was Warsaw, Poland. Oh man, seriously? Wow. Yeah, it was, you know, still communist. And, very gray, very drab. You know, people in raincoats, like going, psst, psst. If you want to buy zloty, you know, I was like, whoa. It was kind of a whole new world, but it was great. I mean, we got to move around. Of course, it was all one-nighters. It was exhausting, but it was, you know, for somebody who had never been to Europe before. Going from New York to Europe, I guess it was quite a shock, like culture. Yeah, I mean, we went all over. I mean, we played all the major cities. We went up into Scandinavia. It was great. Yeah, you still nowadays, like, you know, so that's 45, 46 years later. You still love touring, you know, the road life, and done that for 40 some odd years. Yeah. The pandemic has actually been revelatory in that regard. You know, I've been home for a year. Yeah. And I can't remember, it was many years ago that I've been home for this long a stretch, and it's been fantastic. It's been great. Yeah, it's been great. I get to spend time with my wife. Yeah. You know, I get to establish a routine. When you're traveling, it beats you up. Yeah. Particularly time zone changes and all that. And, you know, plus I have a full-time teaching position here in LA for the last 13 years. So juggling that plus the WDR plus the Yellowjackets, it was a lot. And it took this pandemic to get me to realize that I didn't have to kill myself, quite
to do everything. Yeah.
And that's been really nice.
That's cool.
Yeah.
But Bob, can I ask you something? Like, we're talking about the late 70s in New York, and like, I kind of have to, you mentioned Jimmy Haslip and Jaco before. I wanted to ask you, like, how did you first meet Jaco? And I think he was quite important in your career, right? And
yeah.
Like,
I met
how did your story with him begin?
Yeah, I met Jaco in the Village Vanguard. We bumped into each other, literally. I was going to the bathroom and he was coming out of the bathroom. And we bumped into each other.
Oh,
and he sort of brushed himself off and said, who are you? I said, I'm Bob Mintzer. He said, oh yeah, Mike Brecker told me about you. You want to be in my band?
Oh,
I said, yeah. And that's where it started, this word of mouth. He had just left Weather Report.
Yeah.
And we gathered at Joni Mitchell's loft, which was on Varick Street.
Oh, man.
She was hanging out with Don Alias, who was playing percussion in that first Jaco band. So it was Erskine, Peter Erskine, Don, Michael, and myself, and Jaco. And it was interesting. Yeah, it was very unpredictable. Jaco was, highly unpredictable, but super creative. But it was, it wasn't what I thought it would be at all. I mean, I wasn't sure what I thought it would be, but I was thinking, man, Jaco, Weather Report, extensive charts and, all kinds of arrangements of things. And I showed up at the rehearsal. There was no charts, hardly, hardly any rehearsing, even just, a couple of tunes we were going to play. And I learned them, and we sort of each figured out our own individual parts. And we went over to 7th Avenue South, which was sort of one of the happening clubs at the time, owned by the Brecker brothers.
Yeah.
And we played it. And, of course, everybody came out to see what Jaco was up to. And so that was 1981, and sort of did things with him for 2 years.
Yeah.
Small group and big band.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you that. I mean, I know the big band, of course, and like, but did you do like lots of small gigs? How were they like? Like trio or quartet or?
There was a sextet. It was
a sextet. Okay.
It was Randy Brecker on trumpet, Othello Molino, steel drum player, myself, Erskine, Peter Erskine, Don Alias for most of it, and Jaco.
Oh, wow, that's fun.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it
was great fun. Yeah,
would be fun to be a small fly and like back there see all these sessions and like.
Yeah, there's a nice video of that band from the Montreal Jazz Festival, 1982.
Yeah,
you can find it. You can find it on the internet on YouTube.
Yeah. But
you can find everything on YouTube.
I know, it's incredible. You type things and like it's incredible. Yeah, you just type in things and it's like, Brecker Brothers from 1977, Bob Mintzer soloing 1972 with that, like it's like, wow.
Every note I've ever written or played is on YouTube. Literally.
Probably, yeah.
And you know how much money I make from that?
Yeah, sure.
But that's okay.
Yeah, it's a different animal.
Actually, I don't know if it's okay or not, but it's what it is. And we musicians are resourceful, and we find ways to survive, and we do whatever it takes to support a creative lifestyle where we can play the music we hear in our heads and feel in our hearts. So I'm very lucky in that regard,
Definitely. Yeah.
Yeah.
But can I ask you something, like when was the moment for you, because you mentioned 1981, and when was the moment for you where you decided, like, okay, I want to do my first album as a band leader? I guess you probably led bands before already, right?
Oh, I wasn't really thinking in those terms. I was just trying to learn how to play and learn how to write. And, was involved with playing with bands, playing gigs, playing with bands, learning. And in 79, I guess, I played in a band in New York, led by a bass player named Teruo Nakamura. It was kind of a funk, straight ahead funk band called The Rising Sun. And, Teruo had some connections in Japan and wanted to start producing records. So he asked if I would like to do a record.
Oh, okay.
And it was, I thought, I hadn't really thought of it up to that point. Although prior to that, I had made demos. I had a friend in high school who was an aspiring recording engineer, and he had a little makeshift studio in his basement. So he was looking for people to record. And of course, I was writing and I was looking to record some of this music. So we had this nice relationship. So I'd bring some guys over to his basement, we'd record stuff. So I had several demos, and those demos ultimately led to recording situations. They were a nice calling card. Yeah. But I had a lot of fun. It was a company called Canyon Records, which is actually, was and is one of the largest record companies. They also do video, they do all sorts of things. But I had a pretty decent budget, and I was able to call, some of my favorite musicians in New York. And
that's how Hornman happened, or?
Yeah, Hornman, that was the name of it. And then I did a second one for that company called The Source. The
Source, yeah, I love that. Yeah, with Jaco also on.
Jaco played on a couple of tunes,
yeah. Like, but how was that for you? Like, did you feel like a lot of pressure becoming a band leader, or no, not necessarily?
I wasn't thinking in terms of being a band leader. I was just thinking I was going to make this record, and I was having so much fun, because there was no stylistic constraints whatsoever. And I thought, wow, I can call this guy and that guy, write this way. I could write a clarinet choir on this tune, and just sort of let my mind go wild and, try different things. And it was very educational and also, very rewarding in many ways.
Yeah.
So then I guess after I made those records, I, 7th Avenue South was in play, so I had the opportunity to go in there with a small group and play some of that music, So that's where it started, kind of.
I love the titles also, Fancy Pants and all.
Oh yeah.
It's so cool. It's like amazing when I look at back, and it's basically the players. Then you also played with Jaco, right? I mean, Peter Erskine is on there. And
Don Alias is in there, and Jaco. Yeah, I mean, look, we associate with the people we meet and wind up working with, and it's kind of inevitable. That's what happens.
Yeah. I wanted to ask you, speaking of your records, like about one album you did, actually two, Hymn and the Hudson Project. I'm such a, John Abercrombie is for me probably one of the best guitarists. I mean, like, he was so underrated, still is.
Yeah.
In my opinion. And I wanted to ask you, how did your story with John begin, and like to play on that?
Well, I knew John. I met John in 1970, 71.
Wow.
He lived, like I said, he lived on Warren Street.
Yeah.
And I used to go there regularly, and so we got to play a little bit together and became friends. And he was working with Chico Hamilton at the time.
Exactly.
And so, we had that association. The record Hymn was done for Jean-Jacques Puisseau. He had a company called Owl Records in France, and I also did another record for them. I did actually 3 records for them. I did one called the New York Jazz Quartet, I forget.
Oh yeah.
That was James Williams and Tony Reedus and Jay Anderson. And then I did a duo record with Gil Goldstein.
Yeah, I saw that. Longing, right? No, it's Longing. Yeah, Longing.
Yeah. So the record with the Hymn record, I knew Peter Erskine. I met Peter Erskine in 1969. We went to an arts high school together.
69.
Yeah. So we were collaborating all throughout, and I knew that
Wow.
Peter and John and Mark Johnson had a trio, and I think they made some records together. Or
like 3 or 4, yeah.
Yeah, and then there was that band with what's his name?
John Sermon, they did a record. No.
Yeah, but another guitar player. They had that.
Oh yeah, but no, not the Bass Desires, but
yeah, Bass Desires. Well, there was
yeah.
that.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah.
So I just thought, I asked Jean-Jacques, what about doing a record with this trio with Abercrombie and Erskine and Mark Johnson? He said, great. So that's where that came from.
But you also it's quite a you also, I think, approach this record, at least in my ears, differently compositionally, because it's way more open, if that's the right word. Like, yeah. I love that. Yeah.
Well, you write for the players you're playing with, and that with that configuration, it was sort of the ideal situation to have things be a lot more open.
Yeah, to stretch them. You did that one improv that ends, I think, the album. That's incredible how you stretch it there. I love that, man.
Yeah. So the Hudson Project, that was the other meeting with Abercrombie. That was John Patitucci and Peter. Again, I mean, we had all these prior connections, but that was all through musical equipment. I was playing Van Doren. I was endorsing Van Doren Reeds at the time, and that was part of D'Addario. And so everybody, was using a product that D'Addario either
I didn't know that.
Distributed. So that's how that happened. It was like a promotional thing.
Oh, but did that? I mean, did you ever tour then with those guys? With Joe also? Like,
we toured these mega music stores in the U.S., which was really pretty far out. I mean, like these like gargantuan music stores, and there would be a stage in there, and hundreds of people would come. It was pretty wild.
Wow.
And I guess sort of the idea was we would talk up our equipment, and then now you're in a music store, so now you can go buy some of it.
Yeah. Bob, can I ask you something? You mentioned writing for players. I mean, it's an old thing, like kind of Ellingtonian thing already, but thinking the players you have in your band. But was this always when you started composing, that you always compose knowing who's going to play that thing, or do you sometimes just compose? What's your compositional routine? I mean, that's like, if there is any. Like,
I think early composition for me was, I hadn't really gotten to that juncture yet, but I was just learning how to play, how to write. But at a certain point in time, particularly after you've established relationships with certain players and you're playing with them regularly, you really get to know what they are capable of, and then you write accordingly.
Yeah, that's so important, right? That you get that idea that
Yeah. I like to say, when I'm writing for the Yellowjackets, there's this little miniature Yellowjackets band in my brain, and I can hear it. I hear them, I know what to write, and I know what it's going to sound like.
I sometimes use your Run for Your Life, like for students, like, to play rhythm changes. I love that. And they quite struggle with the rhythmical accents and all that. I love that. It's such a cool tune. But how do you get the ideas? Like, I mean, do you usually start like just with a melody, or it differs from a tune to tune, or?
It varies. Sometimes, I'll hear the whole picture. Sometimes I hear a melody or some harmony or a particular rhythm, or I'm thinking a particular format, as in a certain groove, a certain key, rhythm changes, a blues, or, one chord, or, something odd meter or out of time. I mean, there's all these different parameters you could start with, but more often than not, I might be out walking my dog and I'll just hear something, and it's somewhat unclear, but I sort of have this overall general shape of an idea, and then I'll come back and either throw it into Sibelius or try to play it on the piano, or try to get a little more specific about what it was I was hearing.
Yeah. Yeah. Can I ask you just something also? I'm really curious about it. Like you mentioned 60s and, you saw all these greats playing in New York jazz clubs. But what were like the first jazz records that blew your mind? Like that you heard and you were like, what is this? Or
well, a lot of John Coltrane's records. I mean, all the Impulse stuff. I somehow stumbled onto that very early on. Everything Miles Davis ever did, Thelonious Monk, Sonny Rollins, Charlie Parker, Herbie Hancock. I was a big fan of.
Oh, really?
A lot, all his records. But when I first started paying attention to jazz, he had done. I remember the record Fat Albert Rotunda. It was the band. It was just the precursor to the Mwandishi band. It was the band with Johnny Coles and Julian Priester and Benny Maupin.
Benny Maupin,
that was Tootie Heath on drums, maybe Buster Williams on bass. But those were my main influences. Or the first records I heard, and I wore those. That was the age of where you'd buy an LP and you take it home, and it was just a thing you would cherish and read and hold and play over and over and over and over.
I mean, if you look at you basically lived through all the stages of the record industry from vinyl to vinyl, cassette, CDs, and now this. I don't know what this is, but like, how do you look at this? If you look at the entire development of making an album, and what's your point on that? Because for me, it's like I still have so many CDs, and I always, when I go to a concert, I'm still one of those.
Right.
Not that old, but like I remember buying a CD and you open a booklet and you cherish it and you read about it. Like
I don't know. What are we going to do with all these CDs? I have stacks of them. People send
me too. CDs. My basement is full of CDs. Like,
but I mean, honestly, everything changes, and I'm less focused on the medium, and more focused on making the music.
Yeah. That's it.
I mean, I will say the internet has been fantastic in terms of getting music out to the public.
Yeah.
It's worldwide, immediate worldwide exposure. It's far more difficult to monetize, getting your music to the public, but you have all sorts of opportunities to share your art with people from all over the world, and it's pretty great.
That's definitely. Yeah, cool. Thanks so much, Bob. I wanted to ask you, like, what's the next project that you're kind of working right on now? You already have something brewing up, or?
There's things in the works all the time. I just finished a WDR writing assignment for these young German musicians. Working on music for a documentary on anti-Semitism.
Oh, wow.
Been working this last week on a Jeff Lorber record, playing on a couple of tunes.
Oh, really? Oh, wow.
Yeah. It's just an assortment. I've played on a bunch of records for people in Europe, South America. I think, with this pandemic, people realize that touring musicians like myself are stuck at home, and if you have the wherewithal to record yourself, what a great opportunity, right? I mean, you can get some of your favorite players. I just played on something a couple of weeks ago. Steve Gadd was on drums. It's hard to get him, man, because he's always traveling with somebody, Eric Clapton or James Taylor or whomever. But he's at home, so he was on this record, and that was fun.
I mean, like long distance kind of thing, right?
Yeah,
that's amazing.
But I mean, and I've never had any interest in recording myself at home until the pandemic.
Yeah.
And just as far as teaching goes, I direct a big band at the University of Southern California. I then needed the ability to remotely record a big band and, mix it and produce it and so on. And then I started getting calls to play on records from home. So, it forced me to learn Logic and, get
okay, yeah,
my home studio thing happening. And man, now it's like, this is great, and the thing I like most about it is the commute is wonderful. It's like from my kitchen to my music room takes all of 8 seconds. And also I can get my saxophone or whatever instrument I'm playing to sound the way I want it to without being at the mercy of an engineer or mixing. And I can send a WAV file of my saxophone as it should sound to whoever's recording, and it's, man,
and you can take time to do it actually, right? Like as many
that's the
takes
other
or
thing,
whatever.
right. Yeah, you can, at your own pace, you can work on stuff and, get it just so. So that's been really fun.
Yeah, beautiful. Cool. Thanks so much, Bob, for sharing. I will not waste
My
more
pleasure.
of your time. So
yeah, well, it was good to talk to you.
Yeah,
Samo,
thank you.
And this